Hey y'all, this is Brian Krogsgaard. You may know me as Ledger Status on Twitter. I just wanted to do a video this morning kind of in response to what I saw on John Oliver's show last week tonight. He always does a big breakdown segment that usually lasts 15 or 20 minutes, something like that. And this week he covered Bitcoin. I've watched his show on and off for a few seasons, and I think on the whole, he's been fairly good about covering issues, of course, with a great deal of satire, but also fairly thoroughly and, typically pretty fair, at least as an outsider on whatever I was watching. And I was really curious to see how he would cover Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And I've actually been having some conversations that inspired me to make this short recording because people are wondering, well, is this generally bullish or bearish for Bitcoin and crypto? And I think if you really break down what he said, most of us in this landscape wouldn't disagree with the criticisms that he made of the industry. He essentially is warning people against the same types of things, that any of us would in our own trading philosophy, or what we would warn folks against, not financial advice, but just, not to get involved in scams and not to participate in pump and dumps and not to, and to be wary of, ICOs that don't have metrics that make sense. So that's kind of the way he approached things. The reason I'm not particularly bearish about what he said was, one, there's something to the fact that any press is good press, although I would disagree that the way he covered Carlos Matos and the whole BitConnect thing would be good. That was pretty negative, and he got that spot on. The critique of the way he covered it would be that, well, he's essentially lumping broader crypto and Bitcoin in with the BitConnects of the world and the pump and dump schemes. But I personally think he was pretty fair in terms of saying that, there's something to Bitcoin, there's certainly something to blockchain technology, and he left the window open enough, in my opinion, to, the real parts of crypto and the change that can happen in the technology space or the world in general, while also shedding light on the fact that this is very speculative and we really don't know exactly what the future is going to be. And I don't think anybody in their right mind would really disagree with that. You can see in the background, he covered people that have gone from nothing to becoming billionaires. He talked about the volatility. He used Dogecoin as his as one example of like a joke in the space, talking about the multi-billion-dollar valuation for something that was supposed to be a joke currency. One of my friends was arguing with me earlier, basically saying that, well, Doge is more legit than a lot of the projects that you see out there, because at least it's not a pre-mine or, ICO with founders reward, all these kinds of things, and that it has some utility as like a tipping token or something like that. And I think while that's perfectly fair, that also requires even more nuance than I think is appropriate for something like he's covering. And Doge is a pretty easy target, considering the person that created Doge agrees with what John Oliver said. So that's, I don't really blame him for using Doge as an example. Another example of a legitimate project that he kind of warned against, at least in terms of the verbiage that was used, was the EOS project, and the way Brock Pierce has talked about it, of changing everything, and that the fact that they've raised $1.5 billion over this course of a 9-month ICO process that they've gone through, and how, frankly, that there's plenty of concern there, because there's not a launched product yet. There's not a whole lot in terms of what you can show for that, relative to the examples he used of, the amount of money that was invested in Google or Uber or all these other organizations before they were producing stuff. One element that you could use as a counter argument to that would be that something like EOS is a network, so he didn't really get too much into the differentiation between networks and companies, and the fact that these aren't really valuations of the companies as much as they're valuations of the possible networks. And in general, I just think he was pretty fair. You know, like I would not watch what he did and say like, wow, this is like turning me off of crypto. Although I do see if you're a risk averse person, like maybe it would turn you off. So I see the critique. I don't know that I would say the average person's going to watch this and walk away and be like, wow, I'm never ever going to put any money into this thing. It's crazy, because he really did start off with the fact that Bitcoin is a very interesting, highly speculative asset, and it's really created a new asset class. And he's got he used the example of Dan in their office as being that guy in their office, and I do think that's true. Like there's somebody in your life or whatever that is the advocate for Bitcoin and crypto, and it's people like Dan that are gonna kind of go the next level to help you differentiate the good from the bad in this space, and I think that's important. And on the whole, he was just advising caution. He wasn't telling people they shouldn't put any money into any project. And while he maybe lumped all ICOs together a little bit, even that I felt like on the whole was fine. What he said really wasn't that bad. So I don't know. I just don't see this as particularly bearish sentiment or unfair. I felt like it was pretty good. It was certainly funny. He's always pretty funny to me. And yeah, in general, I think it was fine and not really something to be worried about or whatever. And I was surprised that in a small chat that I'm a part of, that I was essentially the only one that felt like it was relatively bullish versus bearish. But on the whole, I thought it was pretty informative and worthwhile. So check it out if you haven't. I just wanted to, I guess, give my 2 cents. Maybe it's worthless in terms of whether I thought there was value there. And I certainly think it was. And this is, if nothing else, this is a super mainstream audience that he's addressing. This is probably your typical possible crypto investor, the audience, younger audience that's more tech savvy, that's going to somebody like John Oliver for their general news and would probably be very interested in this segment. So I do think that this will have some lasting impact in terms of the way people view these things. So that's worth taking into consideration as well. That's all I got. I don't know if that adds to the conversation at all. Just another hot take. Jokes that, we'll all have a hot take on what something like this means. I'm really curious to see, since Bitcoin's been in this downtrend for a while now, how that affects the conversation in mainstream media in terms of how people cover Bitcoin and crypto, whether they just try to say like, oh, look at this big crash and all that kind of stuff, or whether they keep paying attention to it as the technology grows and whatnot. So we'll see. But yeah, if you like it, subscribe, like, whatever. Do check out his video. I thought it was really funny and pretty good. I would send this to people that are more interested in it, because I felt like it describes some of the risks that people investing in the space should be aware of. And I think advising caution is the right call. So there you go, and talk to you later.